Have you ever had a moment where you stopped and thought, why don't I feel anything anymore? Not sadness, not happiness, not excitement, just nothing. Good news happens, and logically you know you should feel excited, but the excitement never really arrives. Something disappointing happens, and instead of frustration or heartbreak, you just nod and move on, almost like you're watching your own life from a distance. If you felt this way lately, you're not alone. Millions of people quietly experience something psychologists call emotional numbness. And the strange part is, many of them don't even realize it's happening. Today, we're going to explore why this happens, how the mind slowly disconnects from emotions, and what it actually means when you start feeling emotionally flat. Sometimes emotional numbness doesn't arrive dramatically, it creeps in slowly. At first, you might just notice something small, maybe a moment that should feel exciting, just doesn't. You achieve something you worked hard for. You receive good news. Someone gives you a genuine compliment, and your mind recognizes it. But emotionally, the reaction feels strangely muted, almost like the volume of your feelings has been turned down. At the same time, negative events may also stop affecting you as strongly. Things that once would have upset you deeply now feel oddly distant. You still respond, you still function, you still go to work, talk to friends, and handle responsibilities. From the outside, everything looks normal. But internally, something feels different, almost like life has lost a bit of its color. Here's where things get interesting. Emotional numbness rarely begins with the intention to stop feeling. Instead, it often starts with something extremely common, avoiding emotions. But emotional avoidance doesn't always look obvious. Most people imagine someone suppressing their feelings or refusing to talk about them. In reality, it's usually much more subtle. For many people, emotional avoidance looks like thinking, lots of thinking, analyzing, understanding, explaining. Someone might say, I know exactly why that situation upset me. Or, my reaction makes sense because of what happened before. Everything they say is logical and accurate. But there is a subtle difference between understanding an emotion and actually feeling it. Understanding happens in the mind, feeling happens in the body. Psychologists call this pattern intellectualizing emotions. It's a defense mechanism where the brain converts feelings into thoughts. Instead of feeling sadness, the mind explains sadness. Instead of experiencing fear, the mind analyzes it. Instead of sitting with hurt, the mind problem solves it. Why does the brain do this? Because thoughts are predictable. They can be organized and controlled. Emotions are different. They can be messy, intense, and uncomfortable. So the brain quietly learns a strategy. Stay in the head, not in the heart. Over time, a person may become very good at understanding their emotions from a distance, while rarely allowing themselves to truly feel them. It's like standing at the edge of a pool and describing the water without ever stepping inside it. Another common way people avoid emotions is through constant distraction. If you look closely at modern life, there is almost always something happening. A podcast playing, a video running, a phone in your hand, scrolling, watching, listening. The day moves from one activity to the next with very little silence in between. At first glance, this simply looks like entertainment or productivity, but for many people, it serves another purpose. It keeps the mind occupied. Because the moment everything becomes quiet, something else begins to appear. Thoughts, feelings, and emotions that were pushed aside during the day. For some people, that moment of silence can feel surprisingly uncomfortable. So the brain learns a simple strategy. Keep moving, scroll a little longer, watch one more video, start another task. Not because these activities are exciting, but because they help avoid the quiet space where emotions might finally surface. Over time, this constant stimulation becomes normal. People begin to believe they simply enjoy being busy. But underneath the busyness, the nervous system may be doing something very specific, trying to stay one step ahead of emotions it doesn't want to face. One of the strangest consequences of avoiding emotions is that life itself can begin to feel emotionally flat. At first, the change is subtle, but gradually you may notice that things simply don't affect you the way they used to. Moments that once sparked excitement now feel strangely neutral. Achievements that should feel satisfying bring only a brief moment of acknowledgement before fading away. At the same time, difficult experiences may also feel less intense. Situations that once would have upset you now pass with unexpected calmness. For a while, this might even seem like emotional strength. But emotions do not work like separate switches. The brain cannot simply turn off painful feelings while leaving positive ones fully intact. When the emotional system becomes suppressed, it often lowers the intensity of all emotions. Joy becomes quieter, excitement fades faster, even meaningful moments may feel muted. Psychologists often describe this experience as emotional flattening. When the natural range of emotions becomes limited, life continues moving forward, but instead of feeling vibrant and dynamic, it can start to feel like watching events through a slightly fogged window. Many people who experience emotional numbness also develop ways to escape the discomfort they feel inside. Someone might spend hours scrolling through social media. Another person may binge watch shows late into the night. Others turn to gaming, endless online content, food, or alcohol. From the outside, these behaviors simply look like entertainment. But for many people, they serve a different purpose. They help avoid a feeling that is difficult to sit with. Because underneath the distractions, there is often a vague sense of inner discomfort. Sometimes it feels like restlessness, sometimes like quiet emptiness. Sometimes it's simply the feeling that something unresolved is sitting quietly in the background. Activities that stimulate the brain provide temporary relief. They fill the silence and keep the mind occupied, but the relief rarely lasts. Once the distraction ends, the same emotional distance often returns. So why does emotional avoidance happen in the first place? Most people never consciously decide that they want to stop feeling their emotions. In fact, many people who feel emotionally numb wish they could feel more, not less. The answer often lies in how the brain protects itself. When someone experiences prolonged stress, repeated disappointment, emotional neglect, or relationship trauma, the nervous system can become overwhelmed. Instead of continuing to process every emotion at full intensity, the brain gradually reduces emotional sensitivity. Psychologists describe this as a protective shutdown within the emotional system. It's not that emotions disappear completely. Rather, the brain lowers their intensity to prevent emotional overload. In many ways, this is similar to how the body responds to physical pain by dulling the sensation. But because the emotional system is interconnected, reducing sensitivity to painful feelings can also reduce sensitivity to joyful ones. This is why emotional numbness often feels like a loss of emotional color. One of the biggest misunderstandings about emotional numbness is the belief that someone who feels numb simply doesn't feel deeply. In reality, the opposite is often true. Many people who feel emotionally numb once felt too much for too long, too much stress, too much heartbreak, too much emotional pressure without enough time to process it. Eventually, the brain lowers the emotional volume as a way to cope. The good news is that emotional numbness rarely lasts forever. Reconnecting with emotions usually happens slowly and gently. Often it begins with noticing small internal signals again, a tightness in the chest, a heaviness in the stomach, a restless feeling, or a quiet sadness that's difficult to name. When people begin paying attention to these signals without immediately judging them, the connection between the mind and emotions slowly rebuilds. Another helpful shift is asking a different question. Instead of asking, "Why do I feel this way?" try asking, "What am I feeling right now?" This small change moves attention away from explanation and back toward experience. If you recognized yourself in some of the experiences we talked about today, remember this: emotional numbness does not mean something inside you is broken. Often it means your mind has been trying to protect you for a long time. The ability to feel deeply is rarely lost forever. Sometimes it simply becomes quiet for a while, and when life becomes a little calmer and safer, that emotional connection can slowly return. Before you go, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Have you ever gone through a period in life where you felt emotionally numb, even though everything around you seemed normal? What do you think caused it? Share your experience in the comments, because hearing different perspectives might help someone else realize they're not alone. Thanks for watching.